Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive. You were dozing off in your hammock. It had been such a quiet day in the post office of home that you had lost all sense of time, or even motivation to do anything. But in a good way, in a comfy way. Your left arm was hanging down from your hammock, drawing lazy circles into the air just above the ground as you slowly swung from left to right. Though sleep would not come just yet, as your co-worker, Eddie Deer, was shifting through the office. The mailman could have sworn that there had been one package with a magazine in it left this morning, and he had forgotten to pick it up from the second delivery of the day. So he personally wanted to bring it to the person it belonged to. Eddie might have a terrible short-term memory, but he balanced it out by being a super nice and diligent worker when it came to it. That, however, wasn't helped by you, Betty Bookmark. You were a soft beige burlap puppet with multiple red and blue patches covering your entire body. Your eyes were two glass marbles with tiger eye patterns that made them look super realistic and feline. The inside of your mouth was a complete void of nothingness, and your hair, despite being made of felt, looked like long paper scraps reaching down to your shoulders, which made many people in the neighborhood call you an animated mailbag with arms and legs, despite your very humanoid body proportions. Wearing the female uniform of the post office, basically all the time, which was a pretty blue jacket, a white shirt beneath, and an adorable blue skirt with black shoes. Honesty was the reason as to why you were lazy, nodding off in your hammock. And that was Eddie Deer himself. The big puppet would stop at nothing to deliver any letter or package in any situation. However, when you woke up in the post office attic that day, which was where you had set up your home, you caught wind of the weather report from your radio. The entire day, ominous clouds would gather over home. The wind was thick with a sickeningly sweet aroma. This was going to be a storm that would leave the town devastated by tomorrow. You just could not allow Eddie to leave in through that. So you hid it quite well when you realized he had forgotten it on his desk after he had went out for a second tour. Was it mean? Maybe. But to you, it definitely wasn't. In fact, to you, you felt like you were being very nice to him. Betty, are you absolutely sure you haven't seen it? He asked as he stepped next to you. You smiled, not even bothering to open your eyes. Yep, 100%. No letter to be found here. You hoped Eddie would leave before the storm hit. And then you just put the letter in his desk chair, pretend like it had been there all this time. However, Eddie's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Hey, Betty, he asked you, because he had seen something. Hmm? Have you heard of that joke I told Howdy the other day? It got me a free hamburger. You lazily opened one eye, focusing it on the mailman's face. Go ahead, you asked. Knock, knock. You giggled. Who's there? Letter. Your heart skipped a beat. Uh-oh. Your fight or flight instinct kicked in. Letter who? You muttered. Just let me check in there for just a second. Without warning, Eddie grabbed you by the leg, holding you up in the air before shaking you. You squeaked like a dog toy, and after a minute of you being roughly shaken up and down, the magazine fell out of your mouth. Having hidden it inside your body, where you had hoped he'd never search. At least he didn't shove his arm down your throat. Would have been difficult to explain the moan that would have given you when he filled your empty space with his massive arm. That would have been impossible to explain. You looked up at the mailman as he was angrily staring at you. I can explain. He then shoved you back on the hammock. You don't have to, he muttered as he picked up the ladder and left. You blinked embarrassed, tapping your fingers together in the hammock. Damn it. Sighing, you jumped out of your sleeping spot. The least you could do was get ready for when he came back to take off his hat for the day. Yeah, that was probably the best way to apologize. Eddie dear was really too upset to care about the harsh winds that were hitting him right into his chest as he made his way to home, the house of Wally Darling. Eddie didn't know it, but Wally's house was actually alive and had subscribed to a magazine called New Houses Monthly. Why Wally was looking at modern houses in the city the painter could never afford was a mystery to the mailman, but had Eddie known that these were the equivalent of spicy magazines for the entity that was Wally's house, maybe he would have thought different about the entire situation and would have kept the magazine in the office until tomorrow. Eddie reached home and pressed the door ringer. Seconds later, Wally opened the door just a tiny bit. Realizing it was the mailman, he opened the door fully. "Eddie, what are you doing out here? It's gonna rain." The man just offered the painter the magazine, and Wally looked at it in confusion. "I didn't order this," he said quietly. And just then a vase fell behind him from the fireplace. And the painter understood immediately. Actually, no, I remember. I ordered this a week ago. Thanks, Eddie, and, Wally looked up at the sky. The first raindrops were hitting the ground already. "You better get home quick." The mailman sighed. "Yeah, but I gotta put my uniform in my locker at the office first and sign out." Wally blinked. Sure thing, old chap. Take care." A gust of wind slammed the door to home closed, scaring both the painter and Eddie. Shaking his head, the tall puppet man turned around, but just as he reached the street, it was as if a pipe in the sky had broken, as the rain started crashing down seemingly all at once. Immediately Eddie was soaked from head to toe and down to his bones. Eddie returned to the post office 15 minutes later. By now you had brewed him a coffee, opened a pack of biscuits, and were holding a towel under your arm, waiting for him. When he entered, he was dripping wet. He sighed and grumbled to himself as you followed behind him. "I'm so sorry," you said repeatedly, waving a towel around in the hopes he'd grab it. But he had none of that. He just went into the locker room, taking off his mailman jacket, throwing it into the changing room's dryer. I got a towel. Can you please dry yourself? I'm sorry," you stuttered. And Eddie sighed in response, blindly reaching for the first warm, soft thing he could grab, which happened to be you. And without looking, he muttered, "Look, I'm sorry," as he began using you like a dry towel. You screamed in shock and pain as you were shoved face first into a soft hip. Your face flushed immediately, heart racing, as your burlap face was rubbed over his wet body. I know, you only had been hiding the letter from me because you didn't want me to go out into the rain. It's nice of you, but I probably could have gotten home by now if I had gotten it easier and, then I wouldn't have felt the rain, and I just was mad, and I'm sorry." Eddie took off his hat, hung it into his locker before using you to dry his hair. By now your body was just as wet as his, and still, without looking, he wrung you out, making you squeak in pain once more as water dripped down from your abused form. Eddie continued blindly apologizing. He felt terrible after being so mean to you, as you were still being shoved against his muscular body. Now he was using you to dry his back by grabbing your legs in his right and your wrists in his left. And still the man was completely unaware what he was doing to you. At least not until he reached his tummy. That's when he finally looked down, realizing what he was doing to you. While your face was pressed right between his chesticles. A complete and utter mess of tangled hair, puppet arms. Emotionally, you were somewhere between complete and utter agony and shock, but also very, very lewd bliss. You wanted to be used more by him. After all, he hasn't, dried his crotch yet. Ah! He almost dropped you as he jumped back, realizing instantly what he had done to you. I'm so sorry, he shouted as he set you down on the locker room bench. You were completely dizzy. Unable to sit, you fell forward into Eddie's arms. Eddie blushed hard, but you just shakily raised a finger. Check, please. Before finally passing out. Waking up soon after, you are wrapped in a warm blanket, hot cocoa in a thermos can before you. Your entire body was in pain, and that's when you noticed Eddie, who was blushing from head to toe. The big puppet man was sitting at the opposite end of the table you had woken up at. Hey, you said quietly. Sorry, he said. What do you mean? You said slowly and weakly. Using you like that? You giggled before falling face first on the table. It was super difficult to straighten yourself up. There was no energy left in your body after all. Why are you saying sorry? You muttered into the wood of the table, but it was loud enough for him to hear. Hurting you? You meekly managed to raise your head a little and grinned from ear to ear. But I loved it! Eddie blinked. Wait, what? You put your hands together like you were praying. Please use me more like a towel, please, you begged. Eddie wasn't used to you expressing any other emotion other than pure and utter sloth. Please, you cried out. We didn't even get to the fun parts of your body. Awkwardly, Eddie crossed his legs under the table. He knew exactly what you were talking about. His face turning from an embarrassed pink to a tomato red. Rubbing your face over the table, you mumbled things, lewd things he had trouble ignoring as you described the things you wanted him to do to you. You sat up leaning against the back of the chair. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I want you to lose me like I'm yours. Eddie was biting his lower lip to the point where he almost drew blood. And then he sighed, stood up, and walked over to you. His large hand came closer to you before wrapping around your throat. Just this once, he growled. Coughing, you managed to croak.